Hi everyone, welcome to this Can AI Be Creative? Creativity Tools versus Generative AI. They're finally fighting. My name is Siobhan. I work in the Academic and Digital Skills team in the library. So for Steph, we've covered over people in the room. You can't actually see the end of the full title of the library now. And we are going to be exploring in this session basically stuff we've done around working with people in terms of using generative AI tools and using creativity tools and what that might mean. Really?
Yeah, that's what they've done.
Yeah.
Oof.
There you go.
Oof. Writing over keyboard. So as Siobhan just introduced, we're from the digital skills team over in the library. We've been helping students and staff being digitally creative for years. And that's even extended to messing around with AI stuff. As soon as AI tools became widely available, we started playing with them. We've got a whole load of digital skills stuff going on. We've got a whole program of taught sessions for students, for staff, for researchers. For just reading the slide, we're getting to the point here, but loads of sessions, including a load of AI sessions which we started doing over recent years. And that's on top of the other things like the digital labs we've got over in the library. So the creativity lab and your Create, where you can do things like 3D printing and 3D scanning and video editing and podcasting and stuff. The whole ethos really is to try and get people being creative with digital technologies. Now, creative. What is creativity? I suppose we ought to really care about that. But rather than ask us, obviously, ask the AI. So we asked Gemini what creativity is, and it says, creativity, in its simplest and most widely accepted definition, is the ability to produce ideas, works, or solutions that are both new, novel, and useful, appropriate/valuable. Which, okay, it got that particular bit because it's given us the references. Its sources are Wikipedia, Britannica, then there's a few blogs and some slightly dodgy organisations and some less dodgy organisations, simple Wikipedia. So it's doing what I probably would have done otherwise and go into reference sources like encyclopedia and dictionaries. And that seems a sensible thing to do, I suppose. But yeah, creativity, it's making stuff in it. Now, in terms of making stuff and the role of AI in making stuff, it'd be wrong of us not to think about the wider landscape of all of this. And yeah, I got Gemini to draw some cartoons to help me convey this to you. But there's creativity as an act, and then there's how AI can potentially help with that. AI certainly sells itself as being able to help us be creative. Little robot thing. Helping us be creative. But also there's that tension from copyright owners. Who knows where it got these ideas of sketches from? Possibly somebody who actually drew that and would quite like some sort of recompense for that. So tensions from that aspect in terms of creativity, that's something big that we have to consider. But also the disruptive effect that technology can have on creativity. We'll come back to that idea in a moment. So we're not going to ignore these elephants that are in the room here. But Siobhan, tell us about how we might actually have approached this.
Okay, I will. We'll swap places very smoothly. So I want to talk about something we've actually done. This is a little bit of a sneaky talking, which is actually a meta commentary on how we've actually tried teaching creativity tools and AI together or not. And that's something we have done before. So what we have done before is run a workshop. But actually before that, I ran a workshop for history of art students that was originally about digital creativity. So we used to do a yearly workshop for master's students in history of art about digital creativity. And it was about exploring their dissertation ideas, thinking about what that might mean and what digital creativity meant in their discipline. But last year when I did it, we were like, well, we kind of can't really ignore AI because we need to bring that into this idea. And so what I did was run a workshop in which we explored ideas of AI generally and in the discipline, history of art. And then also we considered some digital creativity tools and what you might make with those and how you might explore ideas and let them have a go. And from doing that, Steph and I decided we would run a generic workshop on our programme that was pitting basically humans and generative AI tools against each other. It's basically, if you want to be digitally creative, what might work best? Is it better to just do it yourself? Is it better to get AI to do it? Or is it better to use a combination of the two? So we weren't coming with the answers. We were coming as a practical workshop for people to have a go. My example images I made for the first slide for the workshop was I can make a paint can, or I can find an AI generated image. I didn't even generate it. I just found it on Pixabay tagged as AI generated and thought that'll do. And I've made basically the same concept, a paint can, but in very different ways. So the idea was we got attendees to have a go. They took an idea they wanted to work on, and they had to go using some digital creativity tools that we showed them a bit about how to use. I'll talk about those in a second. And we also got them to use Gemini and just sort of compared what kind of things they got and reflect on what it was. So this was our sort of idea for running a workshop to get people to reflect a bit on this area. So I'm aware that we're talking about digital creativity tools and we teach quite a lot of them in different ways, but I just want to share some of the kinds of technologies that we might be talking about when we talk about those digital creativity tools in this workshop we did. So this is just a screenshot from our digital creativity guide, which is all the different pages we have on particular areas. So things like immersive technologies, podcasting. You'll notice, ironically, that generative AI tools actually sits on this thing. We don't really separate out digital creativity tools from AI necessarily. Steph's going to talk about that a bit more as well in terms of things we've done. But there's lots and lots of different areas, games, 3D printing, 3D modeling, that we tend to showcase to people to help them be creative using digital technologies. Obviously, you can be creative with any digital technology. You can write lovely things in a Word document. You can create beautiful slides. You can make beautiful spreadsheets.
Oh, yes.
But these are technologies designed to help people make stuff, create things that they can use as sort of artifacts and stuff. Some tools that I've just listed here for the people who've come just to find out what the creativity tools might be that we often showcase. Tinkercad for basic 3D modeling. You can put shapes together. It's how I made that bucket, basically. Pixlr is an image editor that's a free online one that has recently made it so it looks like you have to pay and use AI features, but you don't. They just kind of made it quite misleading because everyone now, many of these tools have AI in them. If you saw, I wasn't at it, but I've seen Google do this. If you've seen Google's demo of doing AI with Google Vids, we don't have the AI bit, but we have Vids, and you can make videos in that without AI. It's quite useful. Nice little simple video editor. But it's also got AI features if you have the full Gemini package. So, and Canva also has a bunch of AI stuff like sort of in there these days. So even these tools that are ones we recommend people use to get started have AI features. We can't really separate out these tools as much. But I just wanted to actually list you some tools. If you wanted to know, how can I go and make something? You're not used to any tools, go and try one. But we've got loads of other recommendations on our guides as well. So what did the attendees think about our battle between creativity tools and AI? What was useful for them to explore it? And what I've done is I've recreated one of the students' creations. This is not what they made, because obviously every time I put a prompt into Gemini to get an image, it's very different. But this is the kind of thing they asked for. They asked for something that was a whale, and it was in a desert, and they wanted there to be like sweets, dessert, something like that going on. I think they were going for the pun, but I can't even remember if they intentionally did the pun or it was actually accidental. But they ended up with a picture a bit like this. So it was a whale in a barren-looking desert with sweets around, basically. And they made it. And, you know, that's quite creative. You know, you thought of that prompt, you brought together those ideas. But what the student said was, the tone's really sad. Like, it's meant to be whimsical. And AI doesn't realise that what it's made is what basically looked like a beached whale trapped in a desert of sweets. And their one actually looks sadder than this. This was just my first attempt. I didn't save the picture they made. But is quite a sad concept. It maybe you could interpret it says something about global warming and consumerism for this whale covered in sweets. There's lots of ways we might interpret it. And the student sort of said, like, you know, it was very funny to be able to create it, but then they looked at it a bit deeper and thought, that really isn't the tone I thought I was going to get. And I think it's an interesting point that when you're being creative, when something is going to generate things for you, you might not end up with the same tone as if you made it intentionally. And that might be really interesting, but it might also make something that wasn't really what you wanted. So I thought I would apply some digital creativity technologies to this, and I remixed it into a cool album cover just by mirroring the image and adding some funky text. So you can even generate things and then use other creativity tools to work on them as well. So other ways of doing it. But I think generally what we've seen in many of our AI sessions is people start using AI and it's maybe they're resistant and they have a go and then it's funny and a bit fun. And that's nice to see people excited. And then they actually start to reflect on what it actually has done, whether it's useful. And in terms of creativity, I think it made people reflect a bit in terms of the emotions behind what you create and what that means in terms of AI doing it for you. So
I like how you reflected with your reflection.
Yeah, I did.
But yeah, what Siobhan was saying there is kind of how we first started using some of these tools. So I mentioned we kind of hopped on the AI bandwagon as a tool to play with when these tools started to appear. And so what we got here is some of the things that our students created when we ran a digital creativity week back in 2022. And the things that they were coming up with back then, the tools were not as photorealist as they might be now, much more abstract. But then they were taking these images and it was a bit more than just, oh, that's the output. I mean, the outputs are quite nice, but the aim of the week was to create something a little bit more involved than just some pretty pictures that the AI had spit out. It was much more about taking those and building upon them. So, for instance, we had one student who took some of these images and started riffing on the idea of viewing things, of looking at things, and how might you look at things? Well, through a window. And so created a window effect that was projected onto this door here, so that you had the illusion of catching a glimpse of some sort of alternate weird York. And even made a text adventure kind of thing, not just a text adventure, because it used these pictures in it as well. So a twine adventure story that explored these ideas and travelled around, and you could sort of play a character and look at these different views. So it's taking that germ of an idea that the AI tool generates and then exploring it further and using some other tools to take it further. So it's one tool of many. I don't know what happened to the backgrounds of these slides. It was a much darker pink when we created them. So yeah. Now this idea, I'm getting the text on this slide, but this idea is about, well, almost it's a little bit like how sometimes technologies can be a bit disruptive. And AI certainly can be disruptive. Part of why we're talking about it. Photography is a disruptive technology. So photography comes along and suddenly, we were getting our photos taken in studios by professionals. Okay, so it's kind of moved on from having your portrait painted by a professional in a studio, but it's still basically the same until you get something like the box brownie and you can do it at home. And then that technology becomes liberated. It becomes something that we can all do and get experimental with. And so that becomes kind of fun and interesting, but hugely disruptive if you're a photo studio. You have to find a new angle. You have to be doing your wedding photography and stuff like that. The synthesizer, that's another disruptive technology. Now, I've got a mellotron here, which is where you basically a recording. Someone went into a studio and played a violin to get the sound. But then once you've captured that sound, you don't need the violinist anymore. You have a synthesizer to do it. Eurovision no longer has an orchestra pit. Got rid of all those people. It's just press play on a tape. And so hugely disruptive, but also potentially creative, in as much as synthesizers, actually the joy of a synthesizer is finding the weird bits, the synth noises that we think of. It's not the original kind of things that sound a bit like an orchestra. It's the things that sound like nothing we've seen before. And that's one of the exciting features we saw playing with AI in various sessions. It's the weird stuff. It's the more unusual, unearthly things that get generated that are almost like the biggest spark. And yeah, it's been very strange going on with our backgrounds. But now we have an issue here, a situation, because it used to be that AI was being pitched as some sort of creative tool, and when we first started playing with things like DALL-E, it was all about making weird stuff. But a quote here from Justine Bateman, the director, about how AI is being sold to us now, which is they're trying to convince people they can do the things they've been doing easily for years, to write emails, to write a presentation. And the idea that really maybe AI is de-skilling us rather than giving us new opportunities for creativity. That there are things that we can do very nicely. And writing an email, it can be a bit of a chore, but it's not really hard. And when we're looking at creativity, that becomes another consideration for us. It's like I was taking this screenshot for a different reason, but opening Microsoft Paint. My original intention was just to talk about how any of us, when we're met with something like this, might respond in a different way. So I might look at this and think, oh, wow, I can do all these different colors and I've got all these different brushes and things, and I can just start filling this empty void with stuff. Whereas somebody else might look at that and find it a little bit daunting and maybe need a little bit of encouragement to press some of these buttons and see what happens. You know, it takes all sorts. But what we actually have up here is Copilot saying, oh, try Image Creator. Describe with words the image you want to create, then let Image Creator do the rest. And so anybody who was feeling a little bit tentative about the creativity process, well, now they don't have to engage with the creativity process in quite the same way. They can just ask Copilot to do it for them. So that feels to me like a potential danger of this. That's not to say, though, we've seen through experience with working with students in the past how those prompts can themselves be an act of creativity. So you can communicate with the AI and get something out of it. And that process itself, it becomes a creative act. But it is a little bit like almost saying, oh, you can't be creative, you don't have the skills to be creative. Don't worry, I'll do it for you. I think that's my, little bit of a worry here. One reflection.
Interesting. See, I think it's fascinating because I just don't think anyone opens Microsoft Paint just because they want them to give it an image. Like, if you were searching for an image, I wouldn't go to Microsoft Paint. I wouldn't be like, okay, I need a picture of that. I'll go to Paint and see what I can draw freehand in Paint. I think I go somewhere else. So I'm really fascinated that Microsoft have built in that prompt into Paint. Like, that's just not what I think of Paint for. So yeah, fascinating. But on that note, what I think, my reflection on all of this is remembering that these are all just tools that we can use, even if we're using like physical creativity tools as well. That these are all tools, and it might be that they're good at different things as part of the creative process. So we've seen how, just with one example of working with students, they generated images and then turned them into physical installations and games, for example. I was just in the session I was co-running previously, had someone who was having a go to try and generate images of policemen who got an academic poster. They were testing what would happen if students tried to use Gemini to generate images to go on an assessed poster and what kinds of image it was to get. And they were awful. They just didn't understand what it was actually talking about. They were meant to be about emotional labor, and they just put the word mental health behind the policeman or something. And you can start to see that but that is suddenly interesting. That might make you be creative, because you'd think, well, that's a really bad image, but what's a good image look like? And I could start making that. And I think that seeing them as tools can be a useful way of seeing it as not just, okay, I'm going to use AI or not, or I'm going to use AI to be creative. It's is there things that I could get it to do that would help me when I get blocked or stuck at certain points, and other times I don't want to use it? So my example is, I recently made a video about explaining what Google Apps Script is to people. And I knew I wanted to make it in a sort of fake YouTuber style. God knows why. I thought it'd be funny. So I decided I was going to record myself, and then I was going to put some animated text over the top and that sort of thing. But if I wanted to do that, if I had the right version of AI, I probably could have tried to get AI to make that for me. But what I could do instead is just use AI to help me work out on the structure, think about if there's anything I missed out of my script, or, generate some ideas, or even just ask it how to do this in Premiere Pro, which is the tool I actually use. Give me some instructions for how to make text fade and appear in Premiere Pro. There's things I could use Gemini for while still getting to do the creative fun bit I wanted to do, which was learn how to animate lots of text and images to appear over my face on a screen. So there's different options for how different kinds of tools, digital and not digital even, can be used as part of the creative process. I got my creative output, but I didn't necessarily need to use this sort of linear trajectory of just using one tool or not. And I think that what I'd like to leave you with as a sort of parting reflection, and something maybe people might want to share questions about or comments to round off the session, is to think about, therefore, what creativity means to you. So we've offered Gemini's definition and some thoughts in terms of, it's making stuff. That's what we tend to say. We tend to make it really broad to try and encourage as many people as possible to be creative. But what does it mean to you? As in, what do you want to be able to do yourself? And what elements would a digital tool, whether it's AI or not, help you with? I used a camera and I recorded myself, and then I used a video editor to put stuff over it and edit it. I didn't make stop motion or draw it or whatever other methods I could have used. I made choices in my creative process. So thinking about what you want from the creative process when you're creating anything, and what role does digital play in creativity for you? If you're someone who makes any kind of thing ever, whether you're making a nice slide, whether you're designing when you make any sort of thing at all, you write, you craft, whatever you like to do, what kind of role does digital play in that currently for you? Do you use digital tools as part of your creativity or not? And if so, what kinds of things do you find they do? Because that is, I think, how we can keep reflecting on how generative AI impacts our own creativity. There is no simple answer to our pitting the two against each other. There's no simple, okay, AI is best at this, and, using a different tool is best at that, because it all depends on what you're actually after. I generated this image of a mirror with paint splatters on because when I went to copyright-free image sites, they didn't have any. And I thought, I really want a mirror with paint splatters on to make my point. So I generated one. Now, we don't want to look too closely at this image because there's some errors that include, why is this room just windows? There's a window behind the mirror and there's one in front of the mirror as well. So it's mostly a Windows room and there's no sign of, it's a bit weird. The frame doesn't quite work, but it's a good background image because no one's going to look that closely at it. So this was my creative process. I want a picture. I'm not going to splatter paint in a mirror because I'm at work and I don't have a mirror. I do have paints at work though, so I could have just gone around campus and take some photos. But this is what I did. So I think it's a question for all of us to reflect on as to what we want to use AI for and not. I think if we've seen anything in all of the stuff today, it's been around, there's not like you should use AI for this or not for this. In many cases, it's a bit more nuanced. And I think in terms of creativity, there's loads and loads of issues, as Steph sort of mentioned, and there's lots of things to consider. But it can be a useful tool amongst all the other tools, particularly not for creating final outputs, but for helping with that inspiration and for getting there. So I think you used it recently to put in snippets of a novel you were working, weren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So I had loads of notes and I put them in Notebook LM. It made a cheesy podcast, which I really enjoyed listening to because it was talking about my stuff. And actually, the two people who were having this conversation were asking questions. They didn't have the answers to those questions. They were just asking them as sort of rhetorical questions almost. But they were questions that I hadn't asked myself. Now, I could have just got Siobhan to read my notes, and maybe Siobhan would have also asked those questions. I don't know. But still, we don't all have access to a Siobhan. I mean, we do here in the university, but in the outside world, not necessarily. And so as a kind of way of interrogating the material I created and posing questions that I personally hadn't thought of, then it was quite useful and yeah, genuinely interesting to see that side of it.
Yeah, so I think there's interesting ways people are creative. I have a book on my desk that if I'd have thought I would have brought with me, which is a book of generated images by AI and then poets writing poems in response to those images. So the poems are completely written by humans, but all the images were generated by AI, and I think they just like chose an image to use or something like that. So there's ways that you might also use elements of AI as part of a creative process in various ways. Or it might just be an easy way to get a vaguely relevant picture for your slides. There's lots of different options in terms of creativity. So I said I wasn't pitting them against each other, but I have pitted our guides against each other just to highlight that if you're interested in exploring this further, we have loads of online guides on all this stuff, including our guide on generative AI and our guide on digital creativity. So do feel free to explore our stuff. They're all on our skills guides if you'd like to look more at some of the tools we've talked about or the things you could be doing with them as well. And you can just get in touch with us if you want to talk about any of this or know anything about any of these things. I've listed some of our upcoming AI sessions because I thought it was time for a plug at some point today, with some of the ones we've got coming up that might be of particular interest to staff, these ones. You'll see there's one that says being creative with generative AI. This won't actually be this talk. It will be us doing the session where you have a go at using them, but it's online. So it's not this talk. It's actually us prompting you to try using each with the same idea and see what
Prompting.
We'll prompt you. There's something in there about like, you know, when you use AI, it prompts you, not you prompts it. I don't know. There's something in there. But yeah, we've got lots of training you can find on our AI guide. And also we've got loads of digital creativity training that I didn't list on this slide as well. So if you want to do more of that, you can.
I think it raised lots of questions for me with architecture, and we use creativity and we use digital tools. And it's a sort of discussion we're having about in our profession about how AI is impacting individuals who create original work. So, for example, in architecture, you can actually ask AI to generate a building, but you know, that concept of creativity and authenticity is really important. So I thought it was interesting what you were saying about having AI generate an image that then people wrote a piece of creative writing, but you can equally generate an image and ask AI to write the writing as well. And then the question is, what's the point of the process? Because for me, creativity is about originality and authenticity. And I suppose it's how we ethically use these tools to create new pieces, new ideas. And it's something I think we're all thinking about, isn't it? That sense of ethics and authenticity and what it means for our different disciplines. So we're, as I say, having this debate about for our students what it means, because we're trying to teach them tools to create original work, but then the AI systems are creating work that isn't original. But so it's just a debating issue for us that we're kind of interested in, and what it means in university about how we're supporting students learning using these generative.
It's a bit like, I suppose, you know, you go out and you're inspired by all the buildings that are out there, and you could build a building that looks like that. but then the extra developmental creativity thing, the creative thing to do would be to generate a building that isn't like those, that develops an idea in a completely new direction. And that's one of the limitations of AI, because it's just looking at what exists and stapling it together in a new form. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, more people want to chime in, please do.
Don't you think there is a risk that generative AI will put a seed of creativity or STEM seed that's going to narrow your view as a creative person, because you will have, when you start to see something, you follow that link most of the time. So, that, when you look at some of the data that are produced, you see a lot of things that are very similar, because people are interested in that kind of images, in that kind of thing. And then that view is then narrow that, because, I've seen that, I want to do that. And the other was expert, and others are new.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes back to what Steph was just saying as well. Like, the thing with them is that, especially doing things like image generation, it is basing that on loads of examples of images. So they're going to start looking similar to the most common types of images, unless you really start crafting prompts to get away from that kind of style. And that's what you've seen people say as well.
I think there's as well. Sorry, I think as well. It's like when you're working with children and children's imaginations, where they've been unspoiled by society, compared to working with adults, where they will be a little bit more restrained by expectations. And it's a similar thing going on there.
Generative AI is derivative.
Yeah.
Most human creativity incredibly derivative.
Yeah.
Most music, not particularly original. Upwell's talent show up everywhere. We're constrained by a 12-note scale. If you step off that, people hate it.
Yeah.
So I think there's not as much of a gulf between the generative AI derivativeness and the human derivativeness.
Yeah.
And both occasionally throw up something new and bizarre that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Provocative, but actually.
No, I think that's really true.
Definition is quite problematic. There's so much creativity, very good.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that was when a few years ago, when people were first talking about some of the issues around what happens if it generates work that's similar to other people's existing like artwork. The question was, that's already being done. Everyone's ripping off Keith Haring in like everything they do, basically, in terms of their art style. So AI is doing it too, and it's not necessarily a new issue. It's just become easier for more people to rip it off who didn't originally know how to do it, maybe. But yeah, I think this is exactly the sort of conversation we wanted to have. It's like there's not answers to this kind of question about what it means for creativity, because we're living through it right now. Everyone's trying to formulate what they think about what it means. We might have made our simple question for the name of this workshop, but there's no simple answer to this.
I'm intrigued by what Lorraine's saying, because our architecture programs, do they have creativity fundamentally built into them?
Yeah,
if so, how many others of our programs are like that? And
I think referring back to your question about music and precedent, in architecture, we teach about precedent, and everything we do in creative terms, whether it's writing or whatever we're doing, we're understanding precedent, but we're acknowledging the precedent, and then we're responding to that by an individual project or an individual brief that makes that thing bespoke. So when you talk about buildings just then, but there are lots of buildings all the same, but they all have very different responses to a brief. And that's the creativity piece. So, I suppose for me, there's a concern about how we teach creativity and how students acknowledge reference. So there's these copyright issues, that's the same in music, writing and film and everything we do. And I think that it's being clear for us as we're engaging in it, how you do reference what you've looked at, but then there is that additional piece of individual creativity that we're encouraging.
is it that you're expecting something original, if that's what creativity is, something original from students, and therefore valuing that from them and giving them credit for that? And if they just do the derivative stuff,
well, if we write a brief for 100 students, then there will be 100 solutions. It's the same brief, and that's creativity.
Yeah,
That's all, because I find this interesting, because I see a big difference between the digital tools and creativity. I don't see them, to be honest, with the demonstration that you've made. It's not creative digital tools. You were creative using digital tools.
I see AI as a digital tool.
Yeah.
Whether you use it to have fun or to use it creatively.
Yeah.
So in architecture, it's the same thing. The process that Lorraine has been talking about, I can replicate this and expand on using AI. Studying and analyzing precedents and exploring ideas, and rather than narrowing my vision, I can really expand to unlimited boundaries. But I can also use AI, which I do also sometimes, to do things that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
Just because I don't have anyone to do it, or I don't have, I need a picture, like the mirror.
Yeah.
Right? You can't find it. Okay, I can generate it, and that's it. I use it in a lecture, and that's all. In a previous lecture, a computer science programmer was talking about creating data with particular limitations that he can't find actually in real life work. Okay, AI can use that.
Yeah.
So it has the two dimensions, whether it can be used creatively or used as a, we have like computer-aided design softwares. We can use it also like creatively, creating our own designs or copying designs from previous projects. So
Yeah.
it's exactly the same thing.
That's a really nice actually comparison, because like you can use a digital tool, any tool, creatively and invent your own things, or you can just follow a tutorial and copy it, and you've learned how to use that tool, but you've not necessarily made something that feels new. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Anybody else have any?
It's very good for productivity. Because say I use that right for my lecture. When you want an image next to it, and that's 5 minutes to do that image, I will not be able to find that image. It's not created in 5 minutes. But it is quite difficult to do that as well. It's productivity, and I don't really care about the creativity as long as they never receive the intent to convey the message. But that's more productivity than creativity.
Yeah, I think it kind of, one of the things it kind of goes back to is a few years ago, there was like a sort of joke going around the internet that was like, we wanted robots to do all of the housework so that we could do all our fun leisure. And instead we invented them to do all the creative stuff so we could still do the dishwasher and the washing up and stuff. And I think it comes back a bit to that, is that where we can use AI to help us with the stuff, that we can't do, that would waste our time spending hours, me trying to edit an image to have paint splatters on it in Photoshop. If I could just quickly put that image in my slides, that's saving my time so I can get on with doing some interesting stuff, writing interesting content or something. So I do think that that's like an interesting point around choosing where we use AI. Maybe we choose not to use it in things we see as creative in some ways, but in other areas where it just saves us that ability to do things. Yeah.
That's not, then we don't want to go down that rabbit hole of where did it get that image from? And the creativity of people in the past who finished and all that stuff in beta.
Yes.
I've got a question that went to the VC's office sitting in my intro at the moment, which is, should the university be using AI generated art at all?
Yeah.
And from the creativity angle and all sorts of different angles. And also something from a colleague in chemistry, who said he has a personal framework for the use of AI, in which he explains how he's used it and explains how he has compensated the original people. Really interesting idea. And he's actually paying more money to the originators and various things he's using than he would be previously.
Yeah.
This is sort of personal ethical framework for the use of AI.
I think it's really opened up broader awareness for people around things like intellectual property and copyright, and what we take inspiration from, because people have suddenly become a bit more aware about the fact that AI is often trained on lots of other people's stuff. So it is fascinating where people are perhaps finding new sort of ethical dilemmas, but also their own moral frameworks as part of it.
Very difficult to trace that.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, I've written some text and publishers are asking me, can I change my contract to actually allow all that content to be used by AI? So publishers are aware that this information is being used, and they're trying now to capture it to get some sort of financial recompense, because it is being used. When you've written a book or anything, it's being used, and publishers are trying to kind of contain that, because there is a copyright issue. If you've written something or you produce something and then a system takes it, you are still the owner of that creative work. So how is that? And you know, music, it's similar. You know, how are those things protected?
How good does the AI have to be before you consider it installations on people?
Yeah. And I think this is only going to get more complicated the better they manage to make these tools as well, because you know initially the images we generated looked rubbish, but in a way that was kind of creative, and the students like took a lot of inspiration from them. And the better they get, the more we get these questions of like, you know, what's inspiration, what's just ripping it off, what looks so much like the original that it's like there's a lot of
Thank you.
Thank you.